Breaking news in archaeology. Egyptologists have found the first new tomb of an Egyptian pharaoh since King Tutankhamun. You heard that right. It's the first pharaoh's tomb to have been found in over 100 years. This is absolutely wild. I don't do much news on this channel, but I had to share this with you. Any discovery of a pharaoh's tomb is a big deal, but this one was one of the last undiscovered royal tombs of the 18th Egyptian Dynasty and the husband of the legendary Queen Hatshepsut. That's right, we have found King Thutmose II's tomb. Let's get into it. Way back in 2022, a joint Egyptian-British archaeological team led by the New Kingdom Research Foundation and the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities of Egypt, with archaeologists Piers Litherland and Mohammed Abdel Beatty at the head, was working in the western valleys of the Theban necropolis near Luxor, which is around 2 kilometers west of the Valley of the Kings, when they happened upon a staircase carved into a cliff. The staircase led to a very large descending corridor that was filled with flood debris, and the ceiling had collapsed. The tomb was designated as C4, and it took months to clear that debris. But once they did, the team reached the burial chamber and discovered a blue painted ceiling with yellow stars on it. This is called a Keker frieze, and it is a feature only found in tombs of Egyptian kings. Its walls were also decorated with scenes and phrases from the Amduat. The Amduat is an important Egyptian funerary text of the New Kingdom that translates to that which is in the afterworld, or book of what is in the underworld. And it tells the story of Ra, the Egyptian sun god who makes a daily journey through the underworld from when the sun sets in the west until it rises again in the east. It's associated with imagery of continual death and rebirth. Very fitting for a royal tomb. Not to mention, this text was reserved for royalty, so at first it was believed that tomb C4 belonged to a female royal, such as a royal wife. It was also in part due to its, quote, poorly chosen location between 2 waterfalls and its proximity to the tombs of Thutmose III's wives and that of Queen Hatshepsut, who had prepared herself a tomb here as great royal wife, but was later buried in the Valley of the Kings once she had become a proper pharaoh and ruler in her own right. But the wide staircase and large doorway that protected the chamber hinted at something greater. And with the addition of the religious scenes, this was indicative that this tomb possibly belonged to a king. The tomb is about 29 meters or 95.1 feet long and contains a burial chamber that is around 5 by 5 by 3 meters. And while archaeologists first found the tomb in October of 2022, it wasn't until the late 2024 and early 2025 field seasons when broken alabaster jar fragments found in the tomb after they had shifted through tons of limestone, literally, bearing the name of Thutmose II as the deceased king, along with the name of his great royal wife, Hatshepsut, was analyzed, and researchers were able to identify C4 for what it was: the tomb of a pharaoh. In a Live Science article, Litherland said that one of the fragments bore a label indicating that it contained natron, which was used for embalming, which confirms that a burial did initially take place in this tomb. Other than the debris and some other few finds, the tomb was mostly empty, unlike that of the oh-so-famous King Tut discovery. No human remains were found, and the excavation team found that the tomb had been flooded shortly after Thutmose II was buried, so the grave goods were taken somewhere else. That means that it's possible that there is still yet an undiscovered second tomb where the objects were moved to after the original tomb was flooded. That also means the original tomb wasn't robbed. There are telltale signs to a tomb being looted. In a Times article, Litherland said a robbed tomb usually has broken canopic jars, broken human remains, linen, mummy bandages, shattered furniture, broken amulets, and shabtis. Essentially, a lot of broken stuff. Because we don't have any of that in C4, that means the entire contents had been moved, and it adds more hope that a second treasure-filled discovery might might still be out there. Moshe Kamel, the assistant field director of the mission, has stated that it most likely could be intact as well. The best thing is that Litherland said to the BBC that his team had a rough idea of where the second tomb was. So in my hope, it's just a matter of time until we actually find it. The fragments of alabaster that were left behind in the tomb feel like some sort of destiny or fate was at play here. Dr. Litherland says these alabaster jars had probably broken when the tomb was being moved, and thank goodness they did break a few things during that move, because without that, archaeologists would never have been able to determine whose tomb it really was. What's kind of interesting or funny to note is that the discovery of this tomb was actually published in the autumn 2023 publication of Egyptian Archaeology. The article was written by Piers Litherland, who concluded it by stating that a, quote, tomb of Thutmose II does indeed seem to have been found. The article also mentions large quantities of typical 18th dynasty ceramic plates, bowls, lids, amphorae, and whitewashed storage jars that also add further suggestion that tomb C4 belonged to a king. The article is available to read online if you're a member of the Egyptian Exploration Society, or you can buy a copy for just £1. Mine is still in the post, or I would have it here to show you all. If I do get it in the next week or so, I'll definitely be posting some things on my Instagram stories, so make sure you're following me there to see some behind the scenes stuff and extra images, site plans of the tomb, etc. I also can't really post them here on this video because it is copyrighted material. The significance of finding this tomb, other than it being the first tomb of a king found in over a century, is that it adds considerable knowledge to what we know about the development of royal tombs in the early New Kingdom. While the Valley of the Kings and the New Kingdom are pretty much synonymous with one another, as it was the burial place of almost every pharaoh in the 18th dynasty, and for all of those in the 19th and 20th dynasties, with the exception of Ramses VIII, who we haven't found yet, and Ramses the 11th, where a tomb was created there, but it was never used. The Valley of the Kings didn't come into being until after a few kings of the 18th dynasty were already buried elsewhere. In the 17th dynasty, kings were buried in the area we now call Dra Abu el Naga in the Theban foothills. We actually don't know the precise location of these tombs because they were excavated in the 19th century and everything was removed from them, including any identifying markers. So archaeologists actually might have found these tombs again already, but because there's no markers and there was no archaeological publication about them, on a map, we actually don't know. So we could have them, we might not have them. It's a big mystery, unfortunately. The locations of the tomb of the first two kings of the 18th dynasty, Ahmose I and Amenhotep I, are still unknown, but the first tomb to be cut into the Valley of the Kings was probably KV 20 for king number 3 of the 18th dynasty, and that is Thutmose II's father, Thutmose I. This tomb was subsequently also used by his daughter Hatshepsut after she became pharaoh. So father and daughter were buried together. As I mentioned earlier, this was not Hatshepsut's first tomb. Before she became pharaoh, she had a different tomb under construction in the same wadi where Thutmose II was found. That tomb was identified by Howard Carter in 1916. And there's a really fun story about this tomb. Carter was woken up in the middle of the night to investigate the discovery of these two rival groups of looters that were fighting over the spoils of their looting. And he literally had to abseil down a cliff to get to them. It's very Indiana Jones. Anyways, this discovery ended up leading Carter to map the western wadis because there was now the possibility of other tombs in the area. It's almost poetic that the man who found the last tomb of an Egyptian king also laid the groundwork for future investigation in this area that led to the discovery of the next king over 100 years later. What's interesting is that Thutmose II didn't follow in his father's footsteps in creating his tomb in the Valley of the Kings. He and Hatshepsut decided to go elsewhere, even further from civilization than the Valley of the Kings was located, into the western wadis. Because archaeologists found Thutmose II's tomb so badly damaged by flooding, it may suggest that the ancient Egyptians saw this and realized that, you know what, maybe this isn't the best place for a royal tomb. hence Hatshepsut relocating herself back to the Valley of the Kings and starting a trend that would last for centuries. Not to mention that Hatshepsut was associating herself with her father as a very smart political move for her legitimization as pharaoh. But this video is not about Hatshepsut, it is about Thutmose II. Now you might be thinking, who is Thutmose II? And that, my friend, is a great and totally understandable question because, one, not too much is known about him, and two, he's usually overshadowed by his father, Thutmose I, and his sister wife and successor, Queen Hatshepsut. Not to mention his son as well, Thutmose III, also called Thutmose the Great, who is regarded as one of the greatest warriors, military commanders, and military strategists of all time, and who expanded Egypt's empire to its largest extent. Egyptologists continue to debate even the length of Thutmose II's reign. It could have been as little as 3 or 4 years, around 1482 to 1479 BCE, or it could have even been 13 or more years, so from around 1493 to 1479 BCE. Thutmose II was the 4th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, the first dynasty of the New Kingdom where ancient Egypt achieved its zenith of power. The dynasty itself spanned from 1550 or 1549 BCE to 1292 BCE. There are not many monuments that refer to Thutmose II, but it does seem that he fought against the Shashu Bedouin and dispatched an army to Nubia when they rebelled in the first year of his reign. Probably because he was very young when he ascended the throne, so he wasn't there, he just dispatched the army. Thutmose II died before the age of 30, and his mummified remains are, or perhaps were, thought to have been found in the royal mummy cache found in Deir el-Bahri above the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut in 1881. However, the remains that have been attributed to Thutmose II may be actually too old to belong to him. The mummy that is said to be him is 40 years of age instead of the 30 that he was when he died. So Thutmose II's mummified body and his tomb may still indeed be out there somewhere, undisturbed and lying peacefully in the ground. The discovery of King Thutmose II's tomb is one of the most important archaeological discoveries in decades, and Dr. Muhammad Ismail Khaled, head of Egypt's Council of Antiquities, has stated that it has the potential to reshape our understanding of the New Kingdom of Egypt. The first royal tomb of a pharaoh found since King Tutankhamun in 1922 by Howard Carter is no small feat. The work of this team shouldn't just be chalked up to one tomb, though. They have been working in the western part of the Theban mountain in Luxor for over 12 years, and in that time have excavated 54 tombs and established identities of more than 30 royal wives and court women. That work itself is extremely commendable. Thutmose II's tomb is just the very, very juicy cherry on top. It is so rare to find a royal tomb, and everything that we can learn from it with future research will tell Egyptologists so much about society and politics at that time. For example, the western wadis of the Theban necropolis appear to therefore have been a very important location for members of the royal family of the 18th dynasty. Thutmose II was an ancestor of Tutankhamun, so it almost feels fitting that his tomb was found next after so long. It was never found until now because it was thought to be at the other end of the mountain near the Valley of the Kings. Dr. Litherland has said that they will continue their archaeological survey to learn more about the area and to try and determine where the contents of Thutmose II's tomb were moved to. Because we know so little about Thutmose II, the discovery and news coverage is also quite moving in another way. The ancient Egyptians believed that in order to live on in the afterlife, their names had to be spoken. They couldn't be forgotten. With all of us saying Thutmose II's name this past week, we can only imagine what that would mean for the long-deceased king. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Hope you liked that video. If you did, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Smash the subscribe button so you never miss another update as well. If this does well, if you guys want more archaeological news, let me know in the comments. I will definitely be doing more for you if that's the case. Big thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon. If you like the channel, you want to help support the channel, head on over to the link in my description and become a patron. Thanks everyone for watching. And as always, stay dirty, my friends.